What is the point of living if living has no point, she asked herself. Determined to make a difference, Linda changed herself and began a new life. Her 12 years of frontline humanitarian aid work has taken her to every continent in the world where she has assisted in some of the world's catastrophic natural disasters, such as the Asian tsunami, the Pakistani earthquake, different conflict zones, and refugee camps. Her trademark skill is the ability to broker powerful partnerships between large businesses wanting to offer help in stricken communities but not knowing the best way, and local charities, or NGOs, non-government organizations. Her work is inspired by the notion of giving a hand up, not a hand out. Through her tireless efforts in humanitarian aid work, she has forged relationships with some of the world's most renowned influential figures, such as the Dalai Lama, Prince Charles, Sir Richard Branson, as well as some of the world's largest and most powerful corporations, and many humanitarian organizations. These combined experience gave her the inspiration to launch the Be Change Academies. That sounds familiar, Gandhi. Be the change you want to see in the world, where business leaders can really be a catalyst for change. The Academy uses the entrepreneurial skills and acumen of business leaders to assist in solving some of the world's intractable problems. Linda is a former nurse, stress management trainer, author, and magician. Her book is called Marmalade and Machine Guns, and it is in our bookstore. Please join me in welcoming Linda Cruse.
Thank you so much for that beautiful welcome. So how do you want to be remembered? Just for a moment, I would like you to fast forward to the end of your life. A crowd has gathered, and they're talking about you. How you've loved, how you've laughed, how you've given, how you've served. Just listen for a moment. For the past 12 years, I've been an international humanitarian aid worker, and it has taken me all over the world, to Africa, to Asia, and to South America. I've been in conflict areas in Pakistan and Afghanistan. I've been in the high Himalayas with Tibetan refugees. I've been in the deserts and jungles. My role is empowering the people that I visit, that I meet with, and I always live with the people that I help. I have sold everything I own in the world. I live out of one suitcase, which is currently at Leslie's house. The passion for my work is 100%. There have been certain events that have happened in the last, say, 10 or 20 years that most of us remember exactly where we were when the event took place. One of the events is when Princess Diana died, when the Twin Towers fell, and when the Asian tsunami happened in 2004, Boxing Day. Many of us were eating our Christmas leftovers when this terrible disaster revealed itself on our television screens. I was working at the time in Uzbekistan, and the disaster happened on my computer. And for some reason, I just knew I had to go. I knew that it wasn't the most obvious thing for me to do. This massive disaster had happened, but my calling was absolute. I had to go. I went to Tashkent. I bought my ticket straight to Bangkok. I knew that one of the worst hit areas was north of Phuket. I saw the statistics. 100 feet waves, 230,000 people killed from 14 countries. But I knew I had to go. I landed in Bangkok, I transferred to Phuket, and carried on in a taxi towards the largest survivors' camp in Thailand. You can imagine the scene, the devastation. It was like a horror movie. It was these massive navy boats, metal navy boats, had been thrown 2-3 miles inland as if they were a dinky toy. It was absolute chaos. Just before I reached the camp where I was going to stay with the survivors, I asked the taxi driver to stop. I walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down over the scene where the tsunami hit. I could feel the sweat trickling down my back. My heart was pounding. My mouth was so dry, my tongue felt like it filled my whole mouth. I fell to the ground, and although I've been a nurse for 10 years and I've seen many disasters and dealt with death many, many times, I really felt that this was the one time I actually couldn't manage it. And I collapsed to the floor, sweating, worried. And at that moment, my old nursing matron whispered in my ear, and she said, "Nurse, it's not about you. You are here to serve. It's not about you." So I felt my backbone straighten. I took a large glass of water and I got back in the car. Finally, I reached this huge survivors camp, 5,000 Thai survivors penned together. Sadly, when disasters happen, lots of people come to help, but also lots of unpleasant things happen, and people come to kidnap children for all sorts of things as sex trade. So the children particularly had been penned in one area to keep them safe. So when I arrived there, the first thing I did was just to find somewhere to sleep. And there were these huge communal tents that we were allowed to sleep in. And I started to feel the pain and the grief of the people. It was dark, and I just lay down next to them and I slept. The next morning, as a nurse, I went straight for the first aid tent to see how I could just do something hands-on. I remember distinctly this little girl clinging to my leg. And I asked the young doctor from the US, what was the problem? She had lost 21 of the pillars of her life: her mother, her father, her brothers, her sisters, her aunts, her uncles, her teachers. And I said, what are we doing to help to really heal the terrible grief that these children are going through? During my break from my first aid, I went to the tent where they were starting to do some art therapy. And this is where I could see the amazing strength of the power of one. These wonderful volunteers that always arrive at a time of a disaster, they were there watching the children, encouraging them to share and express their grief through art. The paintings were very dark, very black. And just as I was there, I received a text message. My parents never know where I am, but I received this text message. And they said, "We imagine you're there in Thailand making a difference." And I said, "Yes." But the great thing was, when that text message went off, I had an idea how I could actually help these children who were so grief-stricken. Now, my father and my grandfather are magicians, and I'm also an amateur magician. And I thought, I know what these children need. They need the healing power of laughter. So I called my father and I said, "Dad, will you please give me the telephone number of the head of the magic circle?" He said, "Linda, are you crazy? You're in one of the biggest disasters of recent history and you're asking for magicians?" And I said, "Just bear with me, Dad. Can you do it?" I got the same response from the head of the magic circle. "Linda, you're crazy." I hear that all the time. But he said, "What I will do is I will email all of our members, and if anyone replies, then you can handle them." And reply they did. Within 2 weeks, I had Michael the magician out with me on the front line in Thailand, resplendent in the clothes of a magician. He had all his colourful props with him. He had his balloon animals. He was like this bright, bright butterfly flying amongst these blackened, devastated forests and darkness. He brought the joy. No language is required with magic, no translators. He went up and down the coast, sharing the joy of magic. I noticed, even with the adults, just for a moment, the tension in their shoulders went. The worry lines in their foreheads disappeared. And the teachers would tell me for the first time, the children started to smile. Michael stepped up. He dared to be more than was ever expected of him as a magician. He stood out of his comfort zone, out of his little pigeonhole. And I love the ripple effect of good deeds. So as I was there doing my normal work, helping, empowering, and doing my first aid, I had a call from Arabella Churchill, and she is Winston Churchill's granddaughter. She said, "Linda, I hear you have a magician on the front line." I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, guess what? I've got a mobile circus. Can I bring it?" So I had jugglers, I had clowns, I had stilt walkers. And the healing that happened through these people and the power of one, totally unexpected. Not nurses, not doctors, not construction workers, magicians. It just shows me time and time again how we can all make a difference day in, day out. But how did I get to become an aid worker as I am? Well, when I was 16, I met my Prince Charming. I fell in love, got married, had children when I was 20 and 21. And I was just adoring my career. I was an absolute career nurse. I loved, loved, loved my nursing. But sadly, when I was about 26, my marriage crumbled, and I was a single mum. But as a single mum, I decided I was going to be super mum. And I didn't need any help from anyone at all, but I wanted to make sure that my children had everything: the school holidays, the trips, nice clothes. And in those days, nursing didn't pay enough money for me to be able to do that. So I was lured into working into the pharmaceutical industry, and it never sat well with me, but I got the company car, I got a good salary, and I knew I could tick all the boxes to really enable my children to have a great education. So I did it. But little did I know, as I spent those years, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, working in a job that was really meaningless to me, that although I was taking care of everyone around me, my own health and my own well-being was going down and down. And that was when I had my wake-up call. I was driving back from a sales conference in the north of England back to the south of England. It was 2:00 in the morning. Stabbing pain started to happen behind my eyes. I went blind. I don't know how I managed to park the car and drive onto the hard shoulder. Instinct, I suppose. But I sat there praying to a God I hadn't thought about for many, many years. Why me? What have I done? I was angry. I was frightened. We didn't have mobile phones then, so I couldn't get up and call someone. But I sat and I thought, and I promised that if my sight returned, that I would change myself. I would find my happiness, my purpose, and what I was meant to be doing on this planet. I was lucky. My sight returned. But I kept my promise. And from the time I returned home to my family, I really started to analyze the life that I'd been living. And the shocking factor was, as I started to listen to the conversations I was having with people, I was living in a world of negativity. I was a really negative person. I noticed the conversations that I was having when a friend picked up the phone. We would just be sharing. We would be bouncing back and forth. Did you hear that on the news today? Yeah, it's terrible. Really, I think the salary I get is awful. Constant moaning, going backwards and forwards. And I was the key. So I made a huge commitment to change myself around. The first thing I did was I eliminated the news from my life. I didn't want anything negative coming at me. So I turned off the television when the news came on. I didn't read the newspaper. I turned off the radio when the news came on. Most of news is sadly negative. And what I did do is I filled that space with happy things, with good music, with comedy videos to watch. And I slowly started to turn my life around. It took me 3 months to go from negative to positive. The workshop that I'm doing this afternoon is going to touch on many of the things that I actually built into my life to be able to turn my life around so quickly. During my aid work, and as I said, I've worked all over the world with every religion, with Muslims, with Hindus, with Buddhists, with communists, with socialists, with all traditions and cultures. But I've observed this incredible power of one, how we can all make a difference every single day of our lives. What do they say? A smile is more infectious than a cold. Just by walking out and smiling at someone, it can change their day. I know here at your church, you do loads of community outreach, and you serve each other with your community inreach. And what I always say to people is be significant. Whether you're 33 or 93, leave your footprint in the sand of time. Don't be a sheep in the middle of the herd. Don't sleepwalk through your life. You come with nothing, and you go with nothing. And at the end of the day, all there is your story. And I urge you to make yours a good one. I'm going to conclude this talk with a video that I shot on the front line during my last 12 years of aid work. It's just a short one. And I think we're just going to be closing the blinds so that we get some nice darkness so you can see it clearly. But the power of one I have observed in the most dire, the most poor situations, and the joy and the happiness that can come from these challenged areas through communities and compassion like the one I see in front of me. So I will leave you with the same question that I started with before the movie. How do you want to be remembered?